Alright, hello again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD, Application and Web Development 1111, .NET Framework with Web Databases class. And for that class, the actual textbook for the class is what's shown on the screen. ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Lee Naylor. Problem with the book is, although it's very well written, it's very code intensive, and yet there are not a lot of comments that go along with the code explaining what's going on. So I decided that first I would go through this book that is called ASP.NET MVC by John Galloway of Microsoft and others. For much of that book, it leans on a series of 10 articles from Microsoft that is on the MvcMusicStore music store. MvC3 meaning it's a few versions old. All right. So I've been trying to go over this and replicate basically this series myself. I did part 1, the overview and the file new project. Part 2, the controllers. Part 3, views and view models. Part 4, models and data access. Part 5 is what I'm on now. All right. So I went through, created the store manager controller, and I believe for mine I had to make a change in here. I think I had to, it didn't like the data context class, I believe. I don't remember what it was, but I got it to work. All right. When I tried to come in basically and do this, where I wanted to print out my listing, I eventually got it to work, but it was more a mistake that got it to work than anything else. All right. As it says here, the new store manager class, because of the way that it was created with read-write actions and views, automatically gave CRUD capability. So in other words, we had a create.cshtml, a read.cshtml, an update.cshtml, a delete.cshtml, etc. All right. I think it's shown right here. There's also a details, and 2, 3, 4, 5, I think that's it. Oh, and the index. So we were supposed to come in here and quickly, it says edit the index file and do this so that everything showed. Well, a couple things. Eventually, I think they asked us to remove the art album URL because we weren't going to use that. Yeah, it's gone from here now, and they prettied up, so to speak, the titles. All right. And the author says, first look at the store manager. So then you were supposed to run it. And again, I got mine to work, but the edit didn't work. So I went back and took a look at what I had, and I realized down at the bottom, I had not added information in for the bundling that you typically put at the bottom. So I did add it just to show you right now. So here's mine. Let's get back up to the top here. And we can choose Men at Work. We can edit. Oh, I've got to run the site. I'm sorry. Let's run it. So let's save first, and now we'll run. That's what the problem was. You'll have to trust me here. It wasn't that, wasn't anything else. So I come in here. I go to the store manager, which is what we just added. There it is. Okay. Men at Work, edit. There it is. So I can make a change if I wanted to. And save it. Go back to the list. Here's the details of that. Again, go back to the list, and the delete works. I'm not going to delete it, but they all work. All right. Now, in order to get that to work, I had to change quite a few things. And one of the things that had to change, this is an FYI for you. All right. Is I had to go back in and make some changes to the web.config file. And I am not very well versed in this. I taught a class similar to this at a college I used to teach at, And when I ask people for help on things like setting up basically these configurations and the like, all right, I didn't get a lot of help because by and large, the people who worked at that institution with me knew less about it than I did. That was the wrong web config. This is the right one down here. All right. So here's what we changed. All right. We've got two connection strings, a default connection, and you'll notice catalog equal users, all right, a users.mdf. So that's just literally what it'll create by default. The one we care about is this other one, the one that's associated with MvcStore entities. All right. And I was very confused over initial catalog, all this other stuff. So we're fortunate enough at Rankin at the St. Louis campus to have Mr. Paul Smith as one of our instructors. And Paul's recently come over from business and industry where he does a lot of work with this stuff. All right. And one of the things that he has done, and I'm looking for it right now, I think it's up here, is he started to create some study guides. And these study guides, if you look at the one here, you can see how it talks about connection strings. And it's not my goal to sit here right now and read to you, so I'm not going to. As it says, though, it does tell the website where to find the database. All right. Make sure you update it in the root. Yeah, okay. But let's look at everything that's in here. So, data source. The database instance that you are connecting to. Usually this is the server name. So yeah, that's what we're saying. Attached DB file name. That's the path to the database file. All right. Plus the name of the file itself, which is here. The initial catalog, that's the actual name of the database. The integrated security, whether or not the website should connect to the database with the same Windows credentials the system is running under. Typically, that'll be true. A user ID when you're not using integrated security, and a password if you're not using the security. A timeout, typically it's around 30 seconds. It's the length of time that you want to wait to try to connect to the database before giving up. The other things that are in here, the multiple active record, result set, pooling, and max pool size, I've never dealt with. But taking a short story and unfortunately making it long, I talked with Paul and made these changes, and once I did, stuff seemed at least to work. All right, that's the key thing here. So when I come back over to here and I look, I can see there, okay, my data connection for my MvcMusicStore, and for instance, and there's the MvcStore and a MvcStore 2, so I have to watch it. Okay, and I think it's this one. And there's albums, and if I go in and I show the table data, there it is. And if I go into my artists and I show the table data, there it is. All right. So why am I even showing you this? The reason that I'm taking the time to show you this is to let you know that this stuff does work, but it takes a little bit of work to get it to work. All right. In the handout here, they say the first look, clicking the edit link, I showed you that. Click the back to link or back to list. Then click the details, I showed you that. Click back again. Click the delete and click back to list. So they all work. Now the author says right here, The Store Manager controller contains a good amount of code. Let's go through it from top to bottom. Well, that's a good thing. So, if you are following along with me, I am up to page 11 of this particular handout. It says the controller includes some standard namespaces for MVC. Now, when we get back into the Galloway book, this one, which we'll get to fairly soon, when we get into there, they mention that web config is a place where you can essentially put these using statements. All right? And why do you put these using statements in here? Why do you even say something like MvcStore.model something? It's so when you've got something like this, you don't have to say MvcMusicStore.models.store manager controller. All right, so that's what it gives you. The controller has a private instance of the MvcStore entities that is used by each of the controller actions. The index view, as it says, retrieves a list of all the albums, including each album's genre and artist information. What did we see there? Genre and artist. Now, if we just had the genre and the artist, that would be helpful, but not totally helpful, because we wouldn't know what title we were talking about, and although it looks like everything is $8.99, who's to say that that's the case? What if you had a double album or something like that? All right, so here, this right here is an example of a Lambda expression. All right, we are going to go into those in more depth and breadth of coverage when we get into the class. As it says, we want to display each album's genre name and artist, so the controller is being efficient in querying this information. All right. The details works exactly the same way. It queries an album by ID using the find method and returns it to the view. So in this case, it would be the fifth one. The create, as it says, the create methods are a little different from the ones we've seen so far because they handle form input. When you go to here, and let's try this. In fact, I may get an error, but clicking create new, again, it may error out because I'm not logged in. So let's go and log back in just so you can see this and run the program again. So when I go over to Store Manager Create, remember the idea there is we want to be able to create something new. Now notice it defaults to rock and men at work, but we could come in here. Let's just show it. Okay, well, let's put rock. Let's put men at work. All right, and let's put the best men at work songs ever. All right, and let's put for a price, we'll put in $9.99. This way it's a little different. And I'll even put in Rankin's URL. All right, create. Now it probably went and stuck it right at the bottom. There it is. So we can edit it and look at it. I could make a change here and I could say, you know what, that's not expensive enough. It's now $99.99. Save it, go back, jump back down to the bottom. Boom, it's now $99.99. I can look at the details. And finally, I can go back down here. And if I want to, which I will do right here, I can delete it. And you'll notice that once I deleted it and I jump back down to the bottom again, it's no longer here. All right. Now again, that should be pretty apparent as far as what's going on there. After the user fills in the album form values, they can press save to submit these back out to the application to save them within the database. All right. When you press the Save button, the form will perform the post. When it brings the blank form up, that's the get part of it. All right. ASP.NET allows us to easily split up the logic between the get and the post by having two different create methods. One to handle the initial get browse there to show us the empty form, the other to handle the post when we submit the change. All right. Okay, passing information to a view using ViewBag. One thing to realize about ViewBag is it is a way to pass information. It is not necessarily the best way to pass information. All right. So the author says here, ViewBag allows us to pass information to a view without a strongly typed model object. Well, the bottom line is this. ViewBag will handle any kind of information. You can just create something dynamically. So it says you can type in viewbag.foo equals double quote Jeff Scott double quote. All right. And it'll work just fine. So as an example, what they do here is they use the ViewBag to hold the genre ID. And what is that? That is basically going to be this. And when you click Create New, now I stopped the run, so I'd get an error if I click this. But that's got the drop-down list in it that had the different categories. This is how it's done. There are 3 parameters in here. The first parameter is the list of items, so that's the genres. All right, so this is this. The second one is the selected value. So what do you want? You want that particular genre ID. And then what do you want to display? The name. All right. As it says, so for the, with that, it's pretty simple. 2 select lists are added to the ViewBag. All right. So when you do this create, again, let's run it one more time. Probably should just leave it up there. I guess maybe it is still running. So when I click Create New, they're talking about this one right here and this one right here. So this right here, that is the list of all the genres. That is the list of all the artists. And notice if you didn't like it, you could, I think you can come in here. I thought you could at least. I guess if we want to add a new category, we don't add it in here, all right? Or a new artist, we don't add it here. HTML helpers to display the drop-downs. Says since we talked about how the drop-down values are passed, let's take a quick look at the view to see how these values are displayed. So in the create, as it says, the following call is made to display the genre drop-down. This is page 14 if you're following along in the handout. Anytime you start something with @HTML dot, that's an HTML helper. As it says here, it's a utility method used to perform a common task. Well, you can come in here, you can type in ASP.NET helper methods, and you can get a whole list. All right. Okay, and we are using one of them right now. So it says it's just a method that returns a string which can represent any type of content you want. For example, you can use the helpers to render standard HTML tags. You can also use them to render more complex content. All right. Now they mention here that this call needs to be able to hold 2 things: where to get the list to display and what value should be pre-selected. Okay, if you don't want a genre to come up when you start, you can put in string.empty. Handling the posted form values again. Remember with post, we're talking about what's happening once you are submitting your form values. All right, so what's happening here? Well, first you've got to make sure what you put in is valid. Now, we haven't talked about much about validation and data annotations. That's the next lesson. So you'll see this expanded as we go on. But if it is valid, the key thing here is that's saving it to the database. And once you do that, you return them to the index page. If it wasn't valid, you could have some else or something in there. All right. In fact, if it is valid, you're going to do all this. So only if it's not valid are you going to do this. So the action, as it says, has 4 responsibilities. Read the form values. Check if the form values passed your validation rules. If it's valid, save the data and display the updated list. If it's not valid, redisplay the form with validation errors, which again we'll talk about in the next lesson. The controller action, as it says, is processing a form submission that includes values for the genre ID and the artist ID, plus the text box values for the price and the album art ID. So as we saw already, what if I came in here, left this at, let's change this. So I'll change it to classical. I don't know, I'll just make this up, grab one of these there. But if I said for a title, I'm just going to leave it blank. But for a price, I'm going to put something invalid in here. Notice it's already giving me some built-in validation. All right, I don't know if I put a negative number in here if it'll take it or not. Looks like it does. All right. So if we wanted to put a range in there, for example, we'd be able to do that. All right, I just went back to the list. I'm not going to save that. So the model is validated as mentioned here on page 16 of the handout with a call to the model.isValid. Again, we haven't added any validation rules. Basically that's the subject of the next lesson here. What's important is that this check will adapt to the validation rules we put into our model. So future changes to validation rules won't require any updates to this. Good. We'll just be supplementing or adding to what's already there. Saving the submitted values, again, if it passes validation, we want to save it to the database. So we take that, as it says, we want to add the model to the albums collection. Add that album to the albums collection, and then call save changes to write that to the database. Entity framework generates the appropriate SQL commands to persist the value. After saving, we'll be redirected back to the list of albums so we can see the update. And that's that redirect that's being done right here. And again, as we saw, if it isn't valid, you already saw that when I put in a bad price. All right. So it says to check this out. Well, I already did that. Okay. I put in something. All right. He's real funny. John Galloway and Donna Summer sing. All right. Handling edits. This is page 18 of the handout. Again, as it says, with edits, like we saw with create, there's a pair. The get, which will bring up the existing record to edit, and the post, which will allow us to actually perform the edit. The code for retrieving an album by album ID is the same as we previously looked at in the details. Okay. As with the create, the drop-down values are returned via a view bag. So there's not really anything new in there. Sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. I don't normally get phone calls during this time. And when I looked, I realized I'm at 25 minutes. So let's finish this up in one last lesson in just a couple.